So we like challenging every South African. If you're not leaving and you're staying, you've got to roll up your sleeves. You've got to come to the point where you say, this is my home, this is my house, this is my town, this is my province, this is my country.
I'm not leaving this country for anything. Call me whatever, I'll work with you tomorrow. Thank you. Molweni, ninjani. Ek hoop dit gaan goed met die almal vanoggend. I hope you're all well. I'm extremely inspired this morning. As Johannes introduced me, I'm from the Western Cape. My name is Lennox Plaatjies. Somebody asked me about the surname Plaatjies. That will be discussed at the next event. Yeah, all right. So I'm giving you a reason to invite me again. So that will be discussed in the next event. I'm from a beautiful small town called Woolsley. If you're familiar with the Boland area of the Western Cape, where the best fruit are coming from. I'm from a fruit farming area. And I really want to honor the time this morning to just stay within the 15 allocated minutes, because I think that's all I'm getting paid for. If I'm getting over, they start deducting, so I rather stay within the 15. So much has been said already this morning. I wanted two parts of my talk this morning, and coincidentally, when I came in, Johan spoke about, let's do it in the fashion of a TED Talk. And I want to use the TED Talk as my background to introduce what I'm going to share with you this morning. And I really want to do it within 15 minutes. I spent 18 years of my life working in the prisons of South Africa. And in the last 8 years of that 18 years, I was the head of a prison. I left after 18 years to join a UK-based NGO with the name Emerging Leaders. And Emerging Leaders are doing leadership development work in the most vulnerable communities across the world. In particular, Africa, in South America, and some Asian countries. So when I became the head of Emerging Leaders in 2015, after 18 years in prison, and one day I was extremely challenged by my mentor and a good friend, the founder and that time former CEO of Emerging Leaders. He introduced the concept of TED Talks. He said, listen, Lennox, have you listened to TED Talks? So I started listening to TED Talks, and one day he took it a step further, Johan, and he challenged me. After working together for about 6-7 months, he said, listen, Lennox, you've got so much to share. I want to challenge you to participate in TED Talks Cape Town. Now listen, I'm a farm boy from a small town, extremely uncomfortable to go in unfamiliar spaces. And I said, and I made up a lot of excuses. I said, no, Trevor, I can't. Lennox, he's an Englishman. I'm Lennox, but he's like Lennox. But really now, Lennox, really now? You know, and he said, is it maybe because you're afraid? Maybe because it's a little bit of a poverty mindset. You're not afraid you might, stretch yourself. It took me about a month to convince myself. And I decided, let me just go and do this thing. And let me tell you, there were 3 rounds. I made it to the 3rd round. And my talk was about why it's important for us to invest in education, why it's important for us as South Africans to invest in our fellow countrymen. So growing up on a farm town in Woolsley, all we knew was farm work. I am the son of farm worker family. My father was a farm worker, a migrant farm worker, who came from the Eastern Cape to work on the export, high-value export farms in the Ceres Valley. My mom was also a seasonal farm worker, seasonal factory worker, but most of the time she was a domestic worker for the Van Bosch family in Woolsley. All we knew was the life on the farms. And a lot of what Doc shared this morning I could relate to. So I want to quickly just fast forward and not spend too much of time. I can't even tell you about poverty because it's not a new story. We grew up in a 2-room shack under very difficult circumstances with a mother who became a single mother after my father passed on. But let me tell you, my mom only went to grade 4, standard 2. But she had this ambition in her life. Before I die, all my kids will be educated, irrespective of how far they come. After school, after matric, I never had an opportunity to go and study. I had to go and work. But a couple of minutes ago, I received a message from my professor at the University of the Free State. I'm doing a master's program in sustainable agriculture. Why and how did we come here? If we take the time, as Doc have said, and we share our skills as South Africans. You know, there's so many stories people can tell you about what happens at schools, and I'm just afraid what I might say now might be recorded. My son is at a beautiful school. A couple of years ago, about 2 years ago, at the same school, he's a black boy like me in a white school. And at some point at this school, he came back and said, there's some boys a little bit bad with him, about 2 or 3 boys. And like a father, I said, no, talk to the teacher, and I didn't overreact. After 2 times, no, man, talk to the teacher. And the 3rd time, I spoke to the teacher. Listen, and it stopped. After that, other kids started complaining. You know, when your child is bullied at school, you don't automatically assume it's because of the color of his skin. Because he was about 1 out of 10 to 20 boys complaining. He was the only one who was black. That boy was not bullying him because he's black. That boy was bullying him because he's got something in him that's wrong, that needs attention. Fast forward 2 years later, the same boy who was bullying other kids got beaten up about 2 weeks ago. Let me share the story with you. It's a white boy. My son was heartbroken when that boy was beaten up. You know what my son said? I know what he did was wrong, but he did not deserve to be beaten like that by another boy. I want to encourage us as South Africans, let's share education. It is a grave sin that education becomes a luxury in a country where our strive is equality, is social justice. Doc have said it. And Doc, if we can just go into our townships, there are millions other docs. All they need, good mentorship, opportunity to education. Listen, they don't need charity. They need access to opportunities for good education. Access to opportunities for good exposure. So as a boy coming from a 2-room shack, I participated in a TED Talk. I spoke at various conferences. I went to represent the delegation of South African farmers in Amsterdam on an investment conference invited by the government of Congo-Brazzaville, simply because somebody saw something and gave me that opportunity. We are products of society, good or bad. If society is good to us, you will see the result in who we become. If society is bad, well, I've seen it for 18 years. So my encouragement before I speak about PELS this morning is, I can't be over passionate about education. In my area, I'm called a friend of all the schools. I will do anything to get young kids to go back to school because school got me here. It was at a school that I forgot about the poverty at home. It was at a school that I forgot about the rain that's coming through those cracked zincs of a shack. You won't make a mistake. You won't waste your money, your expertise, and your time if you were to dedicate it to educating the most vulnerable in our country, the youth and those who really want to make a change in their families' lives, but they need people to mentor them in how to get there. And it's through those exposure that when I left prison and I worked for emerging leaders, there was a huge incident in my area in 2013. Farm strike that really went out of control. It started about wages in the table grape industry, and it spilled over to the broader food industry. It started in the Dorans, if you know where the table grapes next to the N1. It moved to Ceres, one of the most wealthiest areas for fruit export. And it exploded in my little town of Wolseley, when one man was shot and killed. That was a farm worker strike that got infiltrated by political opportunists and others. Now let me tell you, I was the head of a prison and I saw my town burning. I saw police vehicles turned upside down. I saw how people were pulled out of their cars and beaten up. And I was the head of a prison. I can't sit here, man. There's something wrong, I can't sit here. And I became part of an organization that said, guys, no, man. Volunteers, no name. I remember, Pastor, in my house, my kids were part of a youth group called Joshua Generation. They were part of a choir. So we were raising funds to buy them an outfit. So we had 30 T-shirts. We still needed a couple of more because there were about 50 kids. And that day when the strikers were so on their most violent, I had nothing else but those T-shirts to give to the pastors and friends I invited to join me to speak to the strikers, to speak to the community leaders, to pray with them. And let me tell you what happened. I gave those T-shirts to them. I said, listen, brothers, we don't have bibs or signs like the UN. We come in peace. We don't have that. But probably this T-shirt might help. And on the T-shirt, it's something that our kids did. They printed on the T-shirt at the back, Joshua Generation. Now, in front, Joshua Generation. At the back, 100% sold out for Jesus. And that's what they wore. We wore when we entered these guys. And from those engagements, we spoke, and we spoke to farm leaders. We spoke to the farm workers and the so-called strike leaders. And a year later, a couple of farmers approached me and said, listen, we want to talk to you. We want to work with you. There's an initiative we are starting. We call it the Witzenberg Partnership. We want to heal the wounds of the past through land. And how we want to do that? Black and white farmers came together and they say, listen, enough. We want to work and find solutions on the land. We want to help to establish successful black farmers. It's not enough to give black people land. It's not enough to give them land and see how they spectacularly fail on that land. Simply because they don't have the skills, the capital, and what is required to make those land and that agricultural enterprises successful. And then we blame them. They wanted the land, look at how spectacularly they fail. You don't need to be a black farmer to fail. White farmers are failing because of a lack of the same things. If you think you're going to farm simply because you are white, I've seen enough to know it's not because you are white. There should be enough money, enough skill, expertise, support, in a great environment, a limitless bank account to make it work. And I believe a lot of you who are familiar with the farming industry will say that. So we came together and we say what we need to do is to establish a supportive environment around these black farmers we want to establish. And again, as Andre said, nothing new will come without resistance. So what was the idea? It's black and white farmers working together to make land reform a success. But private sector drive, communities, it's black farmers, white farmers, and the communities, and those leaders who want to see change in the community. And that pact formed Witzenberg Pels in Ceres. It started in Ceres, and in a short space of time, farmers allocated land. Others say, listen, I'm going to buy a new farm. I'm going to subdivide this piece of land. I'm going to see how I can get water. And we offered this initiative to government in 2015. Ladies and gentlemen, it's 8 years ago. Yesterday, for the first time in the 8 years, I could have a sensible meeting with the full leadership of the Department of Rural Development just across the street at their office. You know why? Government realized without you, private sector, without us, civil society, who make things work on the ground, government can't do it alone. I think after 8 years, they've realized that. We have established about 51 projects in the Western Cape. And in 2020, at the peak of COVID, farmers in the Eastern Free State said, listen, we see what you guys are doing in the Western Cape. The stories of hope, the new farmer leaders you are developing. But it's because of working together. So in the Free State, we've done the same. Farmers have called us and say, listen, we want to partner with you. And we are now journeying with the support of Fieka Beer. We are journeying in Eastern Free State. Black farmers working with white established commercial farmers. And a year later, 2021, farmers in Mpumalanga raised their hand. They said, listen, Laagveld and Hoofveld, we want to meet with you. And a few months later, we launched Mpumalanga Pels at the Bombela Stadium. And I challenged the farmers in Mpumalanga, black and white. Stop allowing other people to speak on your behalf. If you're a farmer, black and white, the challenges are the same. If we can't get favorable lending rates at the banks, if we can't get good prices for our products, if it's not raining as a farmer, black or white, you're in stress. So we need to unite our farmers, because when we are angry, hunger sees no color. It wasn't easy, not without opposition. Just imagine when my father came to the Western Cape in the late 1960s. That's when he met my mom, 1968, 1969. And let me tell you, he only came with a pass from the Eastern Cape. He was only allowed from the Eastern Cape to the farm where he was working. He didn't have permission to leave that farm until season finished, and another guy said, listen, I've got a garage, come and work at my garage. And that's where he met my mom. But let me tell you this thing. I think in my dad's wildest dreams, he could never imagine his son standing here today. In his wildest dreams, he could never imagine his son owning a 30% share in a thriving farming business, which he bought with his own money, but made possible through favorable lending and opportunities to white commercial farmers. We can get this country working. We can get this country working. We can spend so much time, but I want to tell you, it's time that we need to get the right people together. If my son was heartbroken about a young white boy who was beaten up by another boy, listen here, we still have a generation that can help us rebuild this country. And our duty is, as parents, as South Africans, and if somebody asked me last, what was your experience of apartheid? You don't want to go there. But let me tell you, not just the bad. Because I was born in apartheid. But most of my opportunities I got in apartheid. I can speak 6 languages through my exposure. I grew up in an environment where people saw this boy's got potential. And they never shut the doors. They opened the doors. Whether it was the lady for whom my mom worked, doors will always be open. All I'm asking is South Africans, let's open our hearts. There are young people in our townships, like Doc said, they need us. And what is Pial saying? Pial is saying growing together. If we want to continue to heal this country, we can't grow alone. The more successful we become and the more money we make, and we forget about those because we've built high walls to shut them out, there will come a time when the wall will not be high enough. So I'm staying in a community where I'm every day challenged to also wake up and do something. Because why? That's the only country I have. I was telling people, listen here, I've got one passport, which I only got because of the opportunity to travel in Europe and in Africa. I've got no plans to leave South Africa. This is the only country where I've learned heartbreak, painful lessons, but I've also seen opportunities. I've seen compassion. You know the lady for whom my mom worked? Now I'm ending up with this story. I was 10 years old. I was walking through our house with my backpack behind me, my school report. A bright little lighty man. You know, a little bit arrogant, a bit voorbarig, a bit waantoek, but he was bright at school. You know, I could read and write Afrikaans, English, isiXhosa at age 5, before I could even go to school. I read Boedensarkie gaan see toe when I was 5 years old. But you know it's book 2, né? Because I already finished book 1, Boedensarkie is op die plaas. So when I walked with my school report to my mom's workplace, 10 years old, 2 white policemen stopped me at the intersection of Stamperstraat and Millstraat. They stopped me there. Waar toe gaan jy kaffertjie? Gaan na my ma toe, by baas Ben van Bos. You know, and they tried to intimidate me, but let me tell you, there was something. I think God already put this resistance in me. And I kept on saying, ek gaan na my ma toe, daar by baas Ben. And I showed them, there's the house. They let me go, jy moet gou maak. Maak laat jy by jou plek kom, gou maak. And I went there. You know what? I only told that story to my mom, I think a couple of years ago before she passed away. When I was married with kids already. It happened with me 10 years. There was no time to tell that story. Because when I got there, my mother wanted to know, what are you doing here? Sy weet jy moet nie kom by my werk nie. Because the man of the house would announce my coming. Maggie, hier kom jou klein kaffertjie aan. But let me tell you something. In the midst of that, there was a voice that said to him, loud and clear, jy noem nie vir hom dit nie. Sy naam is Lennox. Noem hom Lennox of los hom uit. That was Ben van Bos, se vrou, Auntie Jolene. So I'm telling you, wherever there was a dark cloud, there was always compassion. And there are enough South Africans to tell the story. The Chief Justice, President of this country, told that story. We are more than just our skin color. It's time that we rediscover the humanity within all of us. And when I became the head of prison one day, I had the privilege to have a Mandela Day. And we served food at the old age home in my community. And our communities are not just the black community. It's colored and it's also the white community. And we served the white community at the old age. And as I was standing there introducing my team, this is Sister this, this is Mr. this, and they are all here to help us under Mandela Day. A wheelchair came down the passage. A lady with white hair, beautiful blue eyes. And while I was speaking, I stopped. She was just passing, and I said, I want to stop and acknowledge this beautiful woman here. This angel who saved me when I was only 10 years old. Mevrou van Bos. I believe all of us carry that potential within all of us. But if you want to just run away from it, trust me, you will regret running away. This is the best country to be. I'm not leaving this country for anything. Call me whatever. I'll work with you tomorrow. God bless.